Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. My guest today is Elaine Lin Hering. And Elaine, I'm going to have you tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll get into why you're on the podcast today. So, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to start with I am a human being because too often in this day and age, particularly with social media, it seems like we forget that. We all are
Yeah.
human beings. I am a mother. I am trained as an attorney. I am a leadership development facilitator. And apparently now I'm an author of this book that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
I'm going to drop a little bit of my backstory in there too, because it'll weave into why this book.
Right.
I am the youngest daughter of an immigrant family from Taiwan to the United States. I grew up in the Christian church. All of those things might have something to do with silence.
Yes. Well, I already know where you're going with that, but okay. So, the book that's behind you, for those who are watching on YouTube, is Unlearning Silence, which I also have here: How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully. So, I mean, I have so many questions about when I first, your I think your PR person reached out to me many months ago. I was
Mm.
immediately, yes, I want to talk to her. Immediately, yes, I want to know more about this book that she is writing. Silence, because as a therapist and a life coach, and I've been doing this for almost 3 decades, I work with clients all week long about finding their voice,
Yeah,
those who have been silenced
yeah,
and don't have a voice. And
yeah.
I often find myself, and I will say this to even people in my personal life, but when my clients tell me not just they thought about what they wanted to say and didn't say, whether it be
Mm.
with their partner in a business meeting, at a board meeting, and they're going through the situation, and I thought this and I thought that, and I will say, "Did you say anything?" "No, I didn't say anything." And then every now and then I'll get someone, and they said, "I said this." I said, "You said that?" They said,
Out
"Yes,
loud.
I did." Yes, I'm like, "Good for you." I'm like, "You're finding
Yeah.
your voice."
Yeah. Which begs the question of why might we as adults need to find our voice? We were all born with a voice.
Right,
As babies, we cried. That was communication. It
right,
communicated joy. It created
right,
communicated frustration. It
right,
communicated needs. So how did we lose that unabashed, unfiltered voice? So often we lose it in terms of propriety, in what is appropriate, or in the workplace, what is professional. And I
right,
mean, really clear, we're not saying unlearning silence is not about saying everything all the time to everyone. But if that is a fear that you have of being overbearing or taking up too much space or negatively impacting people, you're probably very unlikely to actually be that person, right? We sort of have that
right.
caricature of that colleague or that friend, that family member who, "Ugh, if they would just learn some silence, the world would be a better place." So there's so much room
Right.
in that spectrum between overbearing, loud, takes up too much space, and as you said, with some of your patients, clients not saying anything at all. But the damage that it does is internalizing this message that we have to edit out parts of ourselves to be
Yeah,
accepted,
to be
keeping
accepted.
our nervous systems on chronic high alert. And we don't realize it later until our immune systems are compromised. Our hair is falling out. We're breaking out in hives. We can't sleep and we don't know what it is. But fundamentally, it is unmet needs that over time, because of cultural norms we have internalized, we forget we have needs and we forget that we could express them, which decreases the likelihood that they get met.
Have you been told, I'm sure you have experiences in your life where you were told to be quiet? I want to go,
Absolutely.
yeah, I want to go back to you.
Yeah. So, youngest daughter, Asian family, living in America. What's funny is the norms of what is appropriate or expected based on the skin that you're in, the
Right.
gender that you present, differs based on context.
Yeah.
So, in Asian context, I was too loud. I was actively hushed. Now, mind you, I
Yeah.
flash back to it was a college event in our church youth group. It was a sporting event. It was like
Right.
Olympics or something. I
Right.
thought at the Olympics you're supposed to cheer.
Right. Right.
Like that's what you're supposed to do.
That's
So
what
I like
right.
whooped or something, which is
Yeah.
not natural for me. I had to work on that whoop.
Yeah.
And someone turned around to me and went, shh. And I
Really?
was like, but it's the Olympics. Like what world am I living in?
Right.
And then the next day, go to work and people like, speak up, speak up. If you don't advocate for yourself, nothing's gonna change. We wanna hear what you have to say. But then, of course, once I say something, people are like, "Oh, that's wrong. That doesn't make sense."
Because you were really surprised or maybe taken aback when someone turned around at a sporting event through your church and told you to shush. And I think that's really very much a put down, being shushed. That's
A
oh, that
and
I
my
have a reaction to
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
as I think we should,
Yeah.
and to go back to how deep-rooted that is, this is decades later, I still remember that moment. I doubt that that person has any
Any
recollection.
idea? Yes.
Right? This is why silence is both about the ways we silence ourselves. What of those messages do I take and internalize? Which of them served me at some point in my life, but may not serve who I am today and who I want to become? And so I need to shed that. But we cannot live intentionally if we're not interrogating those assumptions and aware that they exist and drive our behavior. I could have
Mhm.
in that moment, if I was a different person and hadn't learned so much silence, just shushed him back
Right.
or said, "Hey, it's the
Shush
Olympics.
me.
I'm cheering for my
Right.
team." Any
Right.
number of things. But no, they were a guy. This is patriarchy. I am supposed to respect them. They were probably 3 years older than me, right? All of the
Yeah.
gender,
Yeah.
age, seniority dynamics. And do we even remember that we have the choice and the option to do something different than what is habit?
We do have the choice. We do have the option. I can easily say that, but I also know that
Mhm,
we often feel that we don't.
mhm,
And so
mhm.
many, and I think women, you're right. I think uh, certain cultures, the way we've been raised, the way the culture speaks to us about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate,
Yeah,
we will stay quiet. We don't
yeah,
want to, but we do because it's
yeah.
not worth it. It's not worth it to be embarrassed. To get shushed could be very embarrassing and humiliating for someone.
Mhm,
To be talked down to condescended to at a
mhm.
work meeting. You just it's not. And
Yeah,
you talked about that in your book. It's not worth it. It's just
yeah.
stay quiet.
Why would I use my voice? Why would I speak up if it's not gonna be well received and, in fact, might make things worse? Which is why, to me, unlearning silence is a communal journey and effort. It is not only about me learning to find my voice and use my voice and speak up more. It is also how do well-intentioned leaders around me and well-intentioned leaders in all of the organizations and communities we live and work in unlearn the ways that they silence the people they lead. Because we all do it.
Yeah.
We just are not aware of it or necessarily willing to admit it. And I don't say that with blame or judgment of those leaders. To me, it's just human nature. We will silence each other by the way that we are wired, by not realizing how hard it is for someone to speak up, by requiring them to look and sound like us in order to be heard. But those are also things we can unlearn.
I'm seeing it today. I stay away from a lot of conversations around politics because I just think that the political climate that we're all living in here in
Yeah,
United States is fraught with uh,
so much.
how shall I begin? Right, exactly,
Yeah,
so much. And I
yeah.
think that so I stay silent because I
Mm,
think that we've lost the art, and this is probably another conversation for another
mm,
time, but we've lost the art of conversation,
yeah.
of debate, and of I don't agree with you, but I still like you and I still want to hear your opinions. So
Mhm.
that's allowing each other to have a voice, but what we're trying to do is squelch two different sides are trying to squelch each other's voices. And
Yeah,
I think that we lose, like, I want to hear all the
yes.
different opinions because that's how I learn. I'm curious.
Yeah,
Why do you think that way? I may not agree with you, but
yeah.
speak. I want to hear your
Yes.
voice. Take up some oxygen in the room.
Yeah.
Go ahead. But
Yeah.
we don't want, I think so many of us today, we don't want to hear what each other has to say. So shh,
Mm,
just stay
mm.
quiet. Unless you agree with me, I don't want to hear you.
And we have, because we don't exercise that muscle of hearing voices that are different than ours, either in their substance, the opinion, or in the how of what they sound like, we don't build that muscle. We have diminished capacity to hear each other, which actually means we have diminished capacity to coexist and to remember that we each are human, which is why
Yeah.
I started there.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. You said the first thing is I'm human. So what was the messaging you received as a child growing up and when you were in your adolescent and your college years? Did your parents, so I'm curious, I mean, did it change?
Mm,
You're from Taiwan.
mhm.
You were born in Taiwan or you were born in the
I
United
was
States?
born in Taiwan,
Im
immigrated here when I was 10
Emigrated
months
here.
old.
You were 10
Yeah.
months old. Um, your parents are raising a child in America. What
Mm,
and she's going to be influenced by American people, which we
mhm.
tend to be, I don't want to make assumptions, but I think we're a little different than from the Taiwanese
Mm,
people a little bit.
mm,
I wonder what it was like for your mom and dad raising this daughter and
mm,
how is she going to be?
mm.
As far as your voice and being quiet, staying quiet, not staying quiet, did they? I'm curious
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure they thought about voice. As an immigrant, you're just trying to survive.
Yeah,
Right, you're trying to pay the bills, you're trying to figure out a system. I have so much empathy and respect for that gigantic move
yeah,
that they made and the discrimination and the racism they
hmm,
faced as a result of that to
hmm,
provide different opportunities for
yeah,
me. And my experience of immigration is one very much of assimilation.
mm,
Right? This idea of the meritocratic melting pot.
yeah,
So many of us, our pasts are silenced because our ancestors have left behind something, right? I know precisely one story, two stories about my grandmother. We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about the hard things. We didn't talk about what might have made you leave or move. And there's such pain and loss and disconnect there that other people have written about more beautifully. I will say that my parents were pretty radical because the culture that we come from is patriarchal, right?
hmm,
Boys are
hmm,
prized in that
yeah,
generation over girls, and they did a phenomenal job of saying that my brother and I were equal, even if that was not the view that my grandmother held. So I felt them actively pushing against it. Um, And I'm still a woman. I'm still an Asian
yeah.
woman in America, right? Contrary to popular belief, they were not tiger parents. We had
They
an
were not.
ethos of work hard, right? But first, I was a tiger child. I pushed myself. I was the
Yeah.
one, and I'll say this publicly because I wrote it in a newsletter recently. I was the one in 8th grade when I had a chance to put a quote under my yearbook that my quote was good and as good is not enough.
Oh, okay. So you're a high achiever.
Oh, and,
You
where
are
did that
going
come from?
for,
Who knows? It was
yeah,
not from my parents, right? They said work
yeah.
hard, but when I was staying up till 2 AM to study, to focus on the grade, they said, "Get a B or a C, go to sleep." And I went, "No, I can't."
That
Right?
was yeah, from
Where
within
does that come
you.
from?
Right, right, right.
And it served me really well. It served
Mhm,
me really well. I went to University of California, Berkeley, go Bears, in-state
mhm,
tuition, didn't
mhm,
realize that it was a world-class school, it was just the
mhm.
local school. And
Wow.
I was lucky enough to get in, and then went to Harvard Law School, where everyone had said, "Oh, when growing up in California, people said, 'Oh, you're such an East Coast girl.'" And I
Oh,
never
that's
knew what that
interesting.
meant.
Yeah. What did it
Uh,
mean?
well, it meant that I'm type A and high strung,
Yeah.
is what I came to learn when I went to Harvard Law School. It was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
these are my
These are,
people.
I found my people. Right, right,
I
right.
found my
Yeah,
people."
yeah, yeah.
But it is also a journey of our voices ever evolving.
Yeah.
And a lesson to me of wherever we came from, that does not have to determine today or tomorrow. Because as human beings, we are ever evolving, ever discovering, and that's the beauty of it. Which to me is, well, what might I experiment with? If I'm not sure what my voice is, because I've spent so much time channeling someone else, doing someone else's bidding, right? What does my manager want me to do? What
Right.
does my mother want me to do? What does my
Hmm.
spouse want me to do? And there are real consequences.
Yeah.
And considering what other people want is a great part of being a considerate human being. The downside is when we over index and we forget that we have needs of our own because they have so long been silenced by everyone else around us
Yeah.
that we forget we have needs that need to be met. We forget that we could have thoughts, feelings of our own. So
But
how do we
when they've
how do
been,
we get that back? Yeah.
yeah, because when they've been squelched
Mhm.
and pushed so far down inside of us, you don't even think, what do I feel? What do I
Yeah.
need? Right?
That is the text that I have text chain going on with my girlfriends right now. "How are you feeling?"
Right.
I don't have emotions today." Right?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't have capacity to open it up because I am the breadwinner, I am the house cleaner, I am the
I know.
childcare, I am all these things and certainly acculturated in that way.
Hmm.
Because if I'm not showing up in all these capacities, I am more harshly judged by myself and
Yes.
by everyone around me. If someone has a messy home, why is that the woman's problem
I know.
rather than the household's problem?
Right.
So we each contribute based on the assumptions that we hold, the biases that we have, the expectations that we have of ourselves and of each other
I
to
coach
this
a,
collective silence.
yeah, I coach a lot of high achieving women around. This
Mm,
is a topic that comes up quite a bit. And when I
mhm.
question, the resistance, the pushback that they give me, and they're like, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, I know, and I know. But really, I
Yeah,
mean, he's not going to clean the house. I mean, these are CEOs. These are like
I
six and
know.
seven figure earners. And like, no, but I gotta, okay, the cleaning lady comes, once a week, but still there's cleaning up to do and I gotta do it. I'm like, you need
Mhm,
to take on their phone, answering
mhm.
calls and dealing with work issues on the weekend.
Yeah,
And two little children.
yeah.
And really yeah, I mean, it's just not having a voice, but I think maybe for women, it's being resistant to voicing change. It's
Mm,
being resistant to voicing change because they don't
yeah.
feel, I'm curious what you think. Don't, don't feel that change can be made. And there's, I don't know if I want it to change. I don't like it, but I don't know if I
Mm,
want it to
mm,
change. What are your
mm.
thoughts on that?
So many thoughts.
Ah,
There's a woman in the book, I've named her Patricia, but she is so many of us. Right? She is the only female on the executive team at work. She is the one who has the pulse on the company culture. She is also the one who is told by her male C-suite colleagues that she's too emotional. She doubts herself. Same thing at home, right? Even if the cleaning person comes, you still need to tidy up. You still need to
yes.
handle payment. You
You
still
got to
need to
clean up for them to come and clean.
all of it. So I want to start with a place from a place of empathy
Yeah.
because it is not that we wanted to take on all of this. It is that the expectations around us have calcified around that from the definite society's definition of what it means to be a good woman.
Yeah.
And until those expectations change, we are being pulled by that gravity, those expectations, and everything we see on Instagram.
Right.
Right? So, I wanna start from a place of compassion around that, that it's not that you are weak or can't resist it, it's that this is the air we're breathing and the water we're swimming in. Second, we at least know what we know. It may not be perfect, it may not actually work,
Right.
but I at least know how this goes. I know where
Right.
the minefields are.
Mhm.
I know how to can patch it together, and one of the interesting pieces of research I came across while doing the book was that uncertainty is the fundamental fear, the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So we know this
The devil
known.
you know versus the devil you don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And
And
to
it
have
takes
to
courage. It takes courage to make change,
it
right?
does, but to expend the energy
Yeah.
to figure out a new paradigm and a new system, I don't have time for that.
I know.
Even if
I
I
know.
know and agree that it would be beneficial. Now, on the subject of courage, totally agree. It takes courage. But courage is necessary, but not sufficient because it also comes down to calculation,
Oh,
right? If we knew that when we used our voices and expressed our needs, we would be heard
yeah.
and that things would change, that fundamentally would change that subconscious calculation we all do in the moment
Mhm.
as to whether to say something. Right. If I knew that my spouse wasn't going to get defensive when I asked him to pick up the socks for the 40th time, and in fact would say, "Yep, so sorry, got it." Or
Right.
better yet, I don't even have to have that conversation
Right.
because they're doing it
Right. Right.
already.
Right. Right. Right.
We wouldn't have to edit. So to me, it is all that family system or that organizational system of what are the ways that silence is baked into the systems that we're a part of. Right? Women are
Yeah.
expected to be this way. It's not just you. Fundamentally, I hope people hear that if you thought you were silenced and that was a personal flaw or failing, it's not.
Yeah.
It's that it is baked into everything. Even as I'm launching this book, the number of conversations I'm having where people say, well, you only got the book deal because there was a wave of Asian hate and the white publishing industry feels guilty. So that's why you got a book deal.
Who said that to you? Come on. That's
Or
ridiculous.
Or come on my podcast. I want you to be your authentic self. But know that anytime we talk about sexism or racism, downloads go down.
Hmm. So
Right? In
I
not so
know.
many
I
words,
know.
we silence each other all the time. And
Yeah.
so if we as women are already holding too much, right? You've got client demands, you've got your
Mhm.
team, you've got turnover, you've got the
Mhm.
economy, you're trying to figure out what to say on social issues or not
Right.
say on social
Right.
issues. You are raising children, you are running a
Right.
household. Where is there time for that change? So I'd
Yeah.
argue, though, because change is possible and is necessary, is actually starting with remembering you have a voice so fundamentally, right? And the first place I'd go is to know, okay, it's not me, it's silence. We all have a relationship. I got to figure out what this is, but it's not me. Take some of that
Mhm.
pressure off. And second, ask yourself two internal questions. What do I think? What do I need? That's invisible work to everyone else, but as you're listening in a meeting, whether you're in a one-on-one, whether you're listening to a podcast, asking yourself, "What do I think?" recultivates the notion that I, as an autonomous individual, might have insights, reactions of my own that are gonna be
Right.
different from other people because I'm a different person.
Yeah.
And what do I need is the radical question that no one else asks women.
What do I need? Meaning, if you're at a staff meeting, you're at a management meeting, what
Mhm,
do I think? Okay.
mhm, mhm,
What do I need? Where I go to with that question is, do I need to say something right now? Do I need
mm.
to voice my thoughts, feelings,
Mm,
concerns, or do I need to stay quiet because I'm
mm,
choosing to stay quiet? Is that
sure. I would go anywhere
with
in
that?
the range of
Yeah.
needs, which could be,
I need this
I
meeting to end because I'm tired and I want it
yes,
over.
I need a nap.
I need a
I need
nap.
I
Yes.
need a breath of fresh air.
Right. Right.
I do need this meeting to stop. I need someone
Yeah.
to hear me. But
Yeah.
our contribution is that we internalize that silencing that other people do to us, and we forget that we have needs, and those needs go unmet, and that's really damaging. Can we change everyone else around us? I hope people pick up the book and well-intentioned leaders become better
Yes.
allies and stop perpetuating that. And hand in hand, what can we do? Not separate from what they do, but because it's all intertwined, we have a bit more control over how we react, about our awareness of our needs. And the thing about being aware that you have thoughts of your own and needs of your own is then it becomes, you can't deny it.
What do I think and what do I need? I love that. And when you were speaking right now, it got me thinking about something that was told to me by my consultant mentor 25 years ago when I first started in my practice. And she was a seasoned master's level therapist. And I was talking to
Mm,
her about a case, and it was of a child, something about a child in the family, and was speaking, and the family wanted to quiet the child, not a 8 or 9 year old.
mm,
I'll never forget her saying to me, and I use this in my practice all the time
mm,
for for almost 3 decades. She says to me, Anna, if that if that child, what they're doing is they're silencing that child, and they're trying to make the feelings and then make the behavior of that child go away, and they just want to cut it off like extinction. But
mhm,
what they're really doing is they're making the thoughts and feelings go underground. So mark my
mhm,
words, it will come out later. And it did.
mhm,
And it
mhm,
did. And I say,
mhm,
have seen it for almost 30 years now. I was
mhm,
just telling a client last week, be careful of that. You got to deal with, come on, let's work through this. Let's work through it, because there was so much pressure from the parental figures in her life. It was like, stop
mhm.
dating this boy who was from the air quote wrong side of the tracks, this boy who's a different religion, not the
Yeah,
same socioeconomic background.
yeah,
And the parents are really trying to squash it.
yeah,
And what ended up happening was she did squash it. She ended the relationship. Years later, ran into him, and all those feelings that did go underground came back out as she saw him randomly in the grocery store one day and started an affair. Both married with children, had an affair because they needed to work through what was
yeah,
never able to have been worked through. But she lost her voice. She said to me, I had no voice. I was
yeah,
told what to do, and I did it. But what the feelings and thoughts all went underground, and they
yeah,
stayed there dormant. So
yeah,
this was almost ripe to happen. And if it
yeah.
wasn't with seeing him and having an affair, it would have been something else in her life.
Yeah, and
Right?
this is where the systems piece comes in, and I say this as the parent of a six-year-old because there are times when I really just want him to shut it.
Yeah.
Like, I am so tired, I do not have time or space for your emotions because of all the things we talked about
Right.
before, and I am coaching myself to say short term, long term.
Yes.
What do I really want? I want him to know that he has needs and that those needs are valid and that he is worthy.
Right.
And so, how do I need to show up in this moment for him?
Mm.
Someone once said to me, the quiet ones are the ones who are not okay, right?
You have to watch them. Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
You have
and
to, you do. Yeah.
there's so much to that, and I think
Yeah.
every parent does the best that they can. I want to
I
believe
know.
that, and it is our responsibility as adults then to say, what did I learn? What about that served me at a point in time, maybe to keep the peace in the family or to avoid the other whatever it is? What served me at that point in time? Does it serve me today? Does it serve the person I want to
Right.
become?
Right. Right.
If not, what can I do about it? Because as an adult, I have the ability to sift through and interrogate what did I learn and how do I want to evolve?
Yeah. I mean, Y I would see this with the quiet ones growing up, and we talk about not having a voice and staying quiet and being silent, and why is it that way when we start to do the family history? Well, because so and so
Yeah.
had mental health and drug addiction
Yep.
issues, and mom and dad were always in crisis. I
Totally.
mean, there was
Totally.
always something going on. That person was always acting
Mhm.
out. So and so had ADHD, and I
Yes.
just kept my nose to the grindstone and got good grades. And here it comes out later, but they learned to be quiet, but it doesn't mean they didn't have thoughts, didn't have feelings. They learned to not pay attention to what they needed. So there's the
Yes.
silence. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then
Yeah.
now that if we have that awareness today, what do we do about it? Because as you
Yeah.
said, it leaks out. It
It
leaks out
does.
in our
I think it's
relationships.
inevitable. I
It
really
is.
do.
It's a
I really
question of
do.
when you wanna tackle it, and I'd argue, are you proactively navigating that, or does it creep up on you?
Yeah.
Because the creep up or the affair, the inevitable,
Mhm.
is
Your own addiction, your own whatever it
far
might
more
be, it
damaging.
spills out. Yes, it spills
It's
out.
never easy to engage, but usually getting ahead of it or driving the process
Mhm.
rather than it having it drive you tends to be healthier for everyone involved.
So, I wanna ask you, so how do we start? So you said I wanna ask you, how do we start to find our voice? I would
Mm,
love to hear your perspective. You said, "What do I think?
mhm,
Or what do I need?"
mhm,
Let's go further. So, in the book you talked about mindset. So, how do we reframe our mindset around staying silent or deciding to
mm,
not be silent?
mm. Take a good hard look at the calculation that tends to be subconscious, because our subconscious calculation often leads us to say it's not worth it. Right?
Yeah,
I know how this
yeah,
conversation goes. We've had it 1,000 times, or I've never actually had it, but the storyline I've told myself is that it's not going to work for whatever
yeah.
reason. And that storyline has calcified. It's the illusory truth effect, right? We think that it has happened this way because we've told ourselves that over time, or it
Yes,
really did happen that time. But we, in terms of a fixed mindset, don't allow for the possibility of something different, of, oh, this is actually a different manager than the one I had last time. It's a different
right,
spouse.
right.
Or also that same family member, they could actually change and evolve too.
Yeah,
What a
yeah.
novel idea. And
Idea, right?
again,
Yeah. Yeah.
the devil you know. If I control the script of who you are and you're not allowed to evolve in the script that I have of you, I have control. It's one way of manifesting control, but it also doesn't allow for growth and the beauty that could come from it. So starting with, um, do I have a voice? I'd argue that everybody does.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite dances with the reader in the book is, and if you're pushing back to say, no, that's not true, not everybody has voice, you just are using your voice to push back on me.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
that's fantastic. You
Yeah.
have different thoughts and perspectives.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Keep
Right.
going.
Lean
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
Um, so there's some assumptions there. Keep us going with another question because there's 1,000 different ways we could go with this.
So and my other question was, how do we support others to speak their
Mm,
truth? And I think we're kind of doing it right now, even if we
mhm.
think, even if we don't like it. And that's what I said earlier about the political arena right now.
Yeah.
That's hard because what we want to do, and you see it with the talking heads in
Yes.
media, they don't want you to keep going and saying, speaking your truth about what you think about politics. They just want you to shut up. They don't want to hear what you have to say. So I do think it has taught many, many people I know, like my friends, like nobody talks about politics. And I think we've
Yeah.
learned, and I'm not going to, at the risk of blaming this on, you know, um, um, legacy media, I'm going to do it a
Mm,
little bit. I think that we have learned that the way they all talk terribly about each other and
mhm,
this, like, I don't know, CNN does like Fox does like CNN and
mhm,
Trump versus Biden versus Trump.
mhm.
There's no room for nuance, and there's no
Yeah.
room for okay, but can we just have a glass of wine and just everybody settle down and
Yeah.
let's just get curious about each other and why
Yeah.
we think the way we do, and I want everybody to have a voice, but people don't want others to have voices. And that's hard for a lot of people in this country. So
Yeah.
they go underground.
Yeah.
So
So let's also play this out though, right? Because this goes back to your question about the calculation. You go underground, and I've seen this in marriages that have dissolved over these
yeah,
political divides. We saw in 2020, we are
yeah,
bracing for this year again. You
right.
go underground, you stay in your echo chamber, you go down what people might say is a rabbit hole, and it is a self reinforcing cycle with no connection. It also perpetuates social isolation, which
Yes, it
our Surgeon
does.
General has said loneliness is the greatest epidemic,
It came
right?
out in 2019. That's why I started this podcast. There was a study by
Mhm.
Cigna Life Insurance. 57,000 people were studied. The
Yeah,
number one issue that was facing the United States before COVID was this epidemic of loneliness. So you're
totally.
exactly right. We're living in
Totally.
isolation. Right.
We're living in isolation. How do we solve for that? One is, am I aware of my need for connection? Can I articulate what I need? I'd argue that most of us want to show up well for each other, but I can't reach you, right? I don't know
Yeah.
what you need right now. Do you need a coffee? Do you need
Right.
a walk? Do
Right.
you want me to just listen? Do you want me to give advice? But instead of asking those questions, we just resolve ourselves to silence, and that perpetuates the isolation, but it also exacerbates our suffering. Our inability to talk about and share what we're each carrying, and right now we are each carrying so much,
Yes.
perpetuates the story that I am alone, that I am the only one, that it is my personal failing or flaw, that I'm not promoted at work, or that my marriage is not where I want it to be, versus, "Oh, wow. You thought about divorce too? Or, like, you were on the
Right.
rocks, or your kid was biting or mooning people?" These
Right.
are the conversations
Right.
I'm having now with people 10 years ahead of me, and I'm like, "Oh, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
It's gonna be okay because I can see that you lived through it. It is okay because you're not actually judging me. I'm not a failed mother."
Right.
Because but even as I'm saying that right now, I'm like, "Oh, I can feel listeners judging me of like, your kid bites people." And I've just said that part. You're right. It's
Mine
the
did. Mine
okay,
did, and
good,
I almost
thank
got
you.
kicked out of the gym when she
Thank
was
you.
when at my fitness gym, and they told me she was a year and a half. They said if she bites one more kid, you're kicked out. And I told her you can't bite another child. So I made her sit on the elderly volunteer. She was like 85 years old. She sit in her lap for 45 minutes every morning, so I could go work out for a little bit. Oh yeah, she's a biter. We just talked. She's 27. We just were talking
Okay.
about it the other day.
She no longer bites. You're giving
Oh
me
no,
hope.
yes, she stopped
Yeah,
biting, but
yeah.
she was biting.
Right, these are the conversations we need to
Yes,
have that
I
remind us
know.
that we are human, even if
Yes.
we don't see eye to eye politically. You
Right.
started by
Right.
saying, "Do we need more courage?" Yes, but we also need to change the calculation. If I knew
Yeah.
it was gonna be okay, that you weren't going to judge me, that you weren't gonna see me as less than, that it wasn't going to damage our relationship for me
Right.
to admit that my kid bites or has bitten, and
Yes.
in fact, you say, "Me too,"
Yeah.
and we right,
I know, right? I
connection.
know.
That
We all
connection
need
is
that. We just need
possible.
it. Yes.
Yes. So let's talk about why our calculation is flawed. Number 1, our calculation is subconscious, and so it perpetuates all the biases and assumptions that we've internalized, which is why we need to do this interrogation work.
Mhm.
Second, our calculation is, we have a bias toward the short term. Right? That short-term discomfort of trying something new, of saying something, of not knowing how the person's gonna react, of the sweat in my palms. We focus on that versus the long-term cost of isolation and rabbit
Mhm.
holes or damage to the relationship anyways. It's just 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years down the line versus now. And third is to realize that the way that we show up, each of us shows up, can either encourage people towards silence or toward voice, right? So
Yeah.
you showing up here and saying, "Hey, me too, that biting is real, it's not just you," that makes it safe for
Absolutely.
me to share. And we each
Absolutely.
have the power to do that for each other.
And I wanna say this too. You have me thinking about I was just having a conversation again. It's amazing how this is such an alignment with so many of the conversations I've been having lately with someone about introverts versus extroverts and ambiverts.
Mm,
And,
mhm,
one thing I've always said is extroverts, of course, I'm an extrovert,
mm,
love extroverts. I love my introverted clients. My introverted clients, they're the quiet ones. We all know them. They're the ones who sit in the staff meeting or at the board meeting and they don't speak. They
mhm,
can be silent. They're the quiet ones in the home. They're the ones who don't have to be the first to say. They don't have to
mhm,
express their opinion. They don't
mhm,
have to raise their hand. They might sit in the back of the
mhm,
classroom. They
mhm,
just don't care that much or
mm.
or need to speak out the way some of the extroverts do and the ambiverts might. But you get those introverts into my office or on a telehealth Zoom or coaching call.
Mhm.
Wow, they're
Yeah.
not silent. They are the most expressive,
Mm.
thoughtful, deep thinkers.
Insightful.
Oh, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
and it's interesting because on the to the outside world, they look like they're these quiet people who don't have thoughts,
Mm,
opinions, and
mm.
oh no, 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 no. Just you wait. Get into a
Yes.
room with them and they get
Yes.
comfortable, they're gonna talk.
So let's also notice why, though, and what assumptions are embedded even in that
Yes.
characterization,
Yep.
right? We, particularly in corporate America, have one version of what voice or leadership is supposed to look like. And if you don't fit that mold, then you lack executive presence. You are not going to get promoted
Yeah.
versus, and that's one way we silence each other, is to assume that you have to sound like that person, typically the norms of the dominant identities, white cis men.
Mhm.
And we miss out on so much insight.
So much.
If we want not just the loudest ideas, but the
Yeah.
best ideas, we need to design our communication flows to say, you know what, you process better by typing? Fantastic. Typing rather than talking. Fantastic. Slack me rather than have to do it live with me. You are a post processor rather than a verbal processor, meaning when we're talking, it's not quite gelling for you, but 20 minutes after the meeting, you're like,
Yes.
I want that
That
idea.
right.
I want that idea. I don't wanna miss out on that and live in a skewed false sense of reality because I couldn't hear it because it is easier for you and it plays to your strengths and your wiring to put it in a message to me in Slack rather than say it to me verbally. I
So
also wanna be clear, this is not, "Anna, tamp yourself down." Right? If you're an extrovert, be an extrovert. If you're an
yeah.
introvert, be an introvert. If you're a typer versus a talker, can we broaden our perspective of whose voices we can hear and the norms and patterns we use to communicate so we can play to each other's strengths rather than seeing someone else's differences
Yeah.
as weakness, that it's just we're wired differently because we're different human beings.
So if you are the introvert and you're at this meeting and you had something to say and you're
Yeah.
processing it later and you thought, "Oh, I do want to communicate this. I
Yep.
have an idea." So your recommendation would be to put it in an email or in Slack, find your voice, voice it.
Yes.
You can it's okay, you can voice it later. Because I think that,
Yeah.
and we're going to run out of time, but I think that there's anxiety that goes along
Mm.
for many people of not having a voice, and and feeling not heard but wanting to say something,
Yes.
and
Yes.
there's this low hum of anxiety inside of them. So I
Yeah.
loved that little recommendation there of you're a post processor, that's okay.
Yes.
Feel like
And
you step back.
leaders need to say that.
Yes.
Leaders need to say that
Yeah.
and normalize it, and actually the way that we design our meetings to say, "Look, we've had a really rich conversation here today. I know we all process differently. We want not just the loudest ideas or the present ideas, but the best ones. Everybody sleep on it. If
Mhm.
something comes up as you're reflecting, drop it in Slack, email, right? Whatever it is. Fantastic. If you're a leader, start having those conversations. If you're
Mhm.
not the leader, circling back, and I would use whatever medium you're most comfortable with that plays to your strengths because the aim is to lower your barriers to entry of conversation and lower the barriers to you using your voice. Pick your preferred medium and say, as I was reflecting on our meeting, this is what came up for me.
Yeah.
Right? It shows that actually you cared enough to be
Yes.
reflecting on the
Yes.
meeting.
Yes.
And depending on whether you're the decision maker, right? I wanted to be sure that you had this insight. I wanted to be sure this was part of the set of factors we're solving for so that we make good decisions for the team, the organization, the business, our family, whatever it
Right.
is.
You're
We
invested.
live,
It shows you care.
you
Yeah.
care. So why would I
Yeah.
hesitate to show that I care and I'm
Right.
dedicated? Because the moment has passed. The moment, relationship, and life is not a one shot moment. So what's our next play? If in the conversation we didn't say the thing, what's our next play? What's our
Yeah.
next conversation? And the conversation, because voice isn't just the words that we say, but voice is how we move through the world,
Mm.
right? Our next step
Mhm.
is really how we influence going forward.
Okay. I think we're going to end there. I have so many more thoughts. This is almost like, okay, this is just the beginning. Okay. Elaine, thank you for writing this book. Unlearning
Mm,
Silence is the book. Everybody pick it up wherever you can find wherever you buy your books today.
yep.
It is a fantastic book. And this is really a lot of thought. just such good stuff is in here. So, if you're listening on audio, you're watching us on YouTube, you can see it in the background of Elaine's room. Get this book and tell us what else you're doing. Let us, what else you got going on for the
Yeah.
listeners and the viewers,
Yeah.
other than book writing.
Yeah, I am on this journey myself of unlearning silence, but the aim and the hope of the book has always been twofold. Number one, that people who have been silenced, who have had to contort themselves, make themselves small, feel seen, known, and heard, and that well intentioned leaders can do better. So that's the
Absolutely.
hope, that's the invitation. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram regularly and have a monthly newsletter free straight to your inbox where your manager can't see that goes out monthly. So elainelinhering.com is where you can
Okay.
find all of those resources.
Okay.
If I may, one
Hmm.
last thought.
Hmm.
The silence we've learned is not the silence that we have to live, right? What served you in the past does not have to define today or tomorrow. So, what is going to serve you and the person you want to become? Because if we keep looking backward, and we need to do that sometimes,
Hmm.
it can feel so overwhelming. But I want to believe in the power of each of us to change. And much like silence breeds silence, voice inspires voice.
Yes.
And that's the world I want to live in. So thank you, Anna, for giving voice
Yes.
to this conversation.
Well, thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed it. This is wonderful. Okay.
Take good
Till next
care.
time. Thank you.